came through. Before that, you couldn't really get a word out of me. I was really shy, but I observed more. I was still like a listener. I was learning. And we did a lot of work with fisheries. I was very fortunate to work on the Bridge River and be walking with bears. Like we would go out, and there were so many fish at that time, even in 1994, that we could walk with the bears out there. They would be feeding, and we would be walking along and getting samples, fish scales. And then shortly after that, they brought this training here through, which was at the time it was called the University College of the Caribou, which is TRU now, and they brought forest tech training in. So they did like a year of training in 6 months. And so I went in there with a group of fellow peers, and we did that, and it got into forestry. And a lot of our that class, we all worked together for about 20 years. We just kind of worked in different areas throughout the territory, and it brought us everywhere in the territory. So I was really fortunate to then take some training in archaeology surveying. And so it brought us all over the territory, and it allowed us to find our history physically out on the land. Like we'd go and find house pit villages, we'd find mat lodge sites, we'd find like scrapers and arrowheads, we'd find culturally modified trees. We found our history everywhere. Pictographs, petroglyphs, they're everywhere. And you can't get away from it. We found a huge quarry way out in the back end of the Hurley Forest Service road, and that's where they would sit, and they would just make arrowheads. And they're everywhere. The spear points are like this big. I was like, what the heck would they be hunting that they needed spear points like that big? But they were there. They were all over. And when you look at the history, to have it could be moose, or it could have been bears, probably grizzly bears, but yeah, they were big. They were ginormous. And just something, that you never think in your lifetime that you're going to be able to find. But that's one, it's like it's a big factory, just a big tool making factory. And, so those are places that we can look at, and we can protect them. And a lot of the time our protection means not telling people where they are. We just let them know that, no, this is a place that you can't go, because how do we go there? Because I'm like, well, how do we go there and learn? How do we go there and, chip away at these large boulders of basalt? Yet, don't get scared. You freak them out. When you go and look at these sites, how do we go there and relearn some of the trades that our people had developed over the years? And I always think that our Statlium history is amazing, and I will always talk about it, right? Lillooet, at one time, we hosted some of the largest trade gatherings in my community of Shekelwash. So where the golf course is, if you go out there, there's 2 village sites. There's one, you pretty much tee off on a house pit rim. Then if you go south a little bit, and there's a big patch of birch, there's another large village there. And so they're both protected. The family has decided, that will protect them. They're not going to do anything with them. But when you go down to, I don't know if you've been to the restoration site down by the hydro campsite, if you've gone there yet, and then you keep going over and past Richard's, you get onto our old fishing trail, and it's actually probably one of the oldest untouched trails that we know about, and we always know that they're untouched because of the depth of the trail. The trail is literally this deep, meaning that it was used over and over and over for years, and our cache pits are all over the hillside, which we thought, wow, how come they're all on the hillside? We actually walked by them years ago. We didn't even know they were there. And then we had to go back down to our fishing trail. We were documenting, we were just surveying it, and I left my camera. And we had to go back down there. And then we seen this tall blue ryegrass, and for us that's an indicator that there is something there for us to look at. So when we're out there and we see it, we're usually going to find a cache pit, or you're going to find a house pit. And so we looked, and the ryegrass was all over the hillside, so we went up into the hill, and there was cache pits all over the hillside, probably about 50 of them. And so that was where they had stored the food for the gathering, so when we did the trading. And when we peeled back the moss layer, we didn't dig in it. Peeled back the moss layer, there was this beautiful scraper sitting right on the top.
What's a scraper?
That was for either just scraping off hides, or you could even use it if you're out harvesting any grasses or herbs or anything, and you would just cut it. So it's just an amazing cutting tool. We had the basalt. We had here obsidian came from up in the Chilcotin, so we would have traded with the Chilcotin. Whenever we had gatherings, that's when we became friends. Other than that, we warred. But we had time where they would just come down and we would trade, and it was peaceful. And, we would look at creating relationships and, looking at what are we trading, what is the resource that you have. So that's how we created relationships with our neighbors. And for here, because we could dry salmon, which not everybody could, so when we dry salmon here, wind-dried salmon or stwan, that was like our gold. I always say the only use we had for gold was chucked it at the Chilcotins when they came down to war. Other than that, we didn't have a use for gold. You will never find it in our cache pits. You will never find gold in our house pits. You will never find it on anything that we actually made. Copper is what we used, but we didn't use gold. So it was interesting to see how that became a really valuable resource when we didn't see the value in using it. It was too, I don't know, too pretty. I have no idea, why they wouldn't have used it. But you will find it nowhere in any of the history of the nations on the Fraser. So that's just a little bit about my history of my community and some of the stories that the Statlium would have. And then shortly after that, I became the chief. Or actually, no, I was on council for 2 years in my community before I became the chief in my community. And I was the chief in my community for 12 years. And so 14 years of politics, but I always sat with the chiefs. I was always a technical advisor to them. So I learned from, a lot of them. My Cookbee Perry Regan, he passed away a few years ago. Cookbee Mike Leach, he just passed away. I sat with him for years, and we negotiated a hydro agreement, forestry agreements, working with DFO, trying to redevelop our language and our education programs. So working a lot with them. Really just trying to make sure that our Statlian people still understand where we are at in this territory, and making sure that they understand title and rights. And that's a hard one, because if you don't understand it, then you don't know how to uphold it. You don't know how to assert that. And it's good that you have a group this age, because years ago, our grandparents would have been sitting with, their grandkids at your age, talking about their way of life, teaching you their language, right? So you were learning at a very young age, which we didn't get that opportunity. That was kind of taken from us for a lot of reasons. But our elders always said, don't ever feel ashamed you can't speak your language, because it was taken from them. And we're very fortunate that we still have some language speakers left. And I always let people know if they can still speak their language, that's very fortunate, because not a lot of us can. And in BC, there's probably actually 56 different languages, indigenous languages, right? So every nation that you go through has their own language. And so when I talk about fish all the time, I was just on a fisheries meeting with DFO talking about the fish farms and the need to get them out, and really trying to explain to them the value that we hold for salmon. And I said, a salmon, once it starts its journey, like a salmon is born in our backyard and it dies in our backyard. And when it goes on its journey, it's actually listening or hearing and being able to understand all these different languages, right? And animals don't get, that's something that you have to really appreciate for a wild fish, right? So when it comes to a farmed salmon, I always say it's, it takes away from what a salmon actually is, because they provide so much. They provide food, they provide value to the health of the ecosystem. They feed all the animals, right? It'll be a sad day when a mama bear can't even teach her cubs how to fish. And those are days that we might be facing, right? So whatever we can do we need to do it, right? If you have ideas and, we all get together, a lot of the time that really works for us to make sure, that one voice when you bring 100 together really matters and it works, right? So we're talking with DFO, even though there was just me and 6 of them, your words impact them, right? So we always have to be very mindful of that. And I feel that over the years with Indigenous people, we always speak honestly, openly, and truthfully, right? We can't lie about our history. We can't make up our history. It's too valuable to do that because we're just trying to piece together our history. And what we see from the land is the land tells us a lot. It tells us what we did in the past, how we lived, how long we were there. If you go out into Houston, I don't know if you've ever been to the house pit out there. Have you kids gone to the house pit out in Houston and gone into it? Well, where the house pit is, there's about 70 sheepskin depressions. So it's still the depression of the house pit. So what happened, so the village site was there, and then what happened when it was either abandoned, then all the roofs caved in. And that would happen, so that's why you get these depressions out there. And so there was an archaeologist that came up, and she was from University of Montana. So they came up for years, and they started looking in these house pits out there. First they were over in the Keatley Creek, that's a larger village site. And she needed to go and look at another one. She needed some house pit to compare to one that they were looking at, because she was looking at the floors and going, hey, I'm noticing there's a couple, floor layers here. So she wanted to go look at another one. So she went directly across the river to Houston. And so they dug in this house pit. They call it house pit number 72. That's the address for it, I guess. And so they were digging in this house pit. And what they found was that house pit, that it was, I don't know if you'd say rebuilt, but it identified, I think it was 17 floors, not like floors, but 7 maybe roofs, I guess, because they would burn the roof and then they would rebuild it. And so they were able to see that house pit, for every 25 years, they would either burn the roof and then they would rebuild it. And then they would switch things around, like you might have, a hearth over here and a hearth over here and your sleeping quarters and a gathering area. And then they would switch it because they would find different hearths and they would have different things in them. So it's really interesting. It's for cooking, like a fire pit. Yeah, so a hearth. Yeah, they call it a hearth. And that's really interesting to be able to see that, right? Because for us, we're sitting out here for years just looking at the depression. And so when an archaeologist comes along and learns these things, we're able to learn from that, and then we start piecing together our history. And we did a dig in my community of Shekelwash just above the restoration site, and we had cache pits. So we did some training. I thought, well, let's add 2 weeks. Let's go in, make sure everybody learns how to do a proper excavation. So the archaeologist said, okay. I said, we just don't want to go dig in there and move dirt around. We want to be able to do it properly and do all the recording. And what we found in them, was a lot of bird beads. And that's, bird bones, and they would just, turn them into beads and wear them. So it was kind of like a factory. But they also had a lot of pink salmon bones, which, for if you're here, we didn't really eat pink salmon because they're spawning here, but we would have cached them. We said probably for the slaves, but I'm not too sure. But we found a lot of birch bark rolls in them. And for whatever reason, we never unrolled them. I just thought they were, that they smoked. They just looked like a cigarette to me, right? It's just birch bark and it's all rolled up. But we should have unrolled them. And I think we're going to go back and dig them up because we just buried them. We documented, put them in little baggies. But I want to see if they're actually documenting supply and demand of maybe salmon because they're cache pits. So that's how we would have had a written inventory of what would have been in each cache pit. So that's what we noticed in our cache pit. So we're doing a bit of a dig just at the bottom of Blue Hill. I think it's going to be next week, and they're going to dig in a couple of cache pits. for that. Probably not this one because it's right on the side of the road. But I think eventually we should. We should actually find a place close enough and bring the kids out there to be able to look at this. It's a tedious process if you're doing a dig because you can't just go dig. You've got to, scrape dirt and really go through, and then you've got to, just document everything. But they are doing one, and it's going to be next week. So I let them know if they find any birch bark rolls, unroll them or call me, and then we can go and actually see if there's anything documented on them, because I think it'd be really interesting. Our history is everywhere here. You cannot get away from it, and you'd be surprised in probably all of your outings that you're actually, you could be running by cache pits, you could be running by arrowheads. Once you know how to spot an arrowhead, you'll never be able to not spot one. Right, your eyes will just go right to it. I've driven down the road and seen on the side of the road a really nice scraper once out the Yellowcombe. Right, so you just get the eye for that kind of rock, that color.
So how do you find the arrowhead?
Probably if we went to a site and we started walking around, and then you'll just know, right? Like I said, they're everywhere. But if you go to a village site, if you went up to Keatley Creek, they're everywhere. If you go out to Bridge River, they're everywhere. If you go onto our fishing trail, they're everywhere. But a lot of people would just walk by them.
Where is Bridge River?
At the Shishkin village. And even in everybody's garden, right? I mean, if people are out there tilling their gardens, arrowheads are coming up, and flakes, scrapers, and it's all a basalt.
Are we just allowed to go look for some?
No, because they're in people's yards. But eventually that's, because you're asking, we should be bringing kids out and getting them to look for them and being able to keep them. If we can't keep them, I would prefer that they stay out on the land. I don't like that they take them to museums. I feel we should be able to take them in our own homes, and we keep them and we pass on the knowledge of all of these artifacts, and instead of bringing them to museum, because then we never see it. Our history is somewhere else. It's not even right here. But we have a lot of history out there. A lot of what was built here, Lillooet, where the mill is, where hydro is, a lot of the history is actually in probably about 3 or 4 museums. I went to a museum over in Ottawa, and they have all of our lacrosse gear. You'd never know that we played lacrosse because there isn't anything here to show you. But if you go over there, you've got all of our, I'll call it regalia or gear, but we would have been decked right out. Like the headdresses alone are just beautiful, and just these really nice feathers, really nice beadwork. You've got the armor, you've got the stick, you've got all the balls that they used, but we don't see it. Why is it over in Ottawa? It should be here at home, right? So we can see all of it. But we played lacrosse with the Inlakahmak, or the Lytton down in Lytton. We played lacrosse with them, and it was a way of showing our stamina before we went to war. And so they have the battlefield down there where they play baseball. It's called the battlefield because that's where we warred. But we would start here and we'd start running. They would come at us and we would go at them. And it was for us to show stamina. Do you want to fight with us? That's what we were trying to say by going out and playing this game with them. And I think we need to bring all that gear home as well, because it's absolutely stunning to look at. But it also shows the birds that we don't have anymore because of all the feathers, right? So it's another way to look at, well, what were we using and what isn't here anymore.
What kind of bird?
Well, if you go, there's like falcons. I didn't see any eagle. Probably, that's what I would like to look at the feathers for.
Falcons didn't go extinct.
No, they're still here. But on those headdresses, that there might be feathers that show us what might be extinct. Right? So, and this gear would probably have been at least 1,000 years old. How they got it, we don't even know the story of where it come from, and I think that's what we lose, is the story of it. And so when we get our stories, we want to make sure we can tell the whole story. And even in the stories that we have, right, they're just little bits of it. And you always hear people when they say, oh, that story could take a week. I want to hear that week-long story. And there's people out there, their role is just to know that story, right? And it's their job to then be able to pass it on. That is their duty. It's their responsibility in their life to pass these stories along. And I don't know, it was in September, I think, we went to Whistler, and we did so my role with the Statliam Chiefs Council now, one of them, is to bring back our laws and how would we use them. And that's a task and a half, because our laws aren't meant to be put into legislation. Our laws are who we are, how we relate to each other, our relationship to the land, the respect that we have. That's where our laws come from. And so it was, so the government got it all wrong when they came along and said, oh, we need you to, help us with these laws so you can put in legislation. We said, no, we can't do that. Our laws is something that we need to teach each other as Statliam, because growing up, we weren't given those teachings. They were taken away from us, and so we're doing what we can to bring them back. And so we went to Whistler, and we worked with a university group called the Indigenous Legal Research Unit. And they look at taking our stories and how to extract the laws and the teachings, or develop case studies for them. What is it that this story is trying to teach you? And for me, it was great to do that, because if you read our stories, you just kind of shake your head and wonder, okay, what is this story about? What was the purpose of this story, until somebody tells you, well, whoever was telling it was trying to teach you something, or there was something that, there was a discipline that was supposed to come from that. And so we had to look at it that way. And it was a good session, and somebody had brought up, we were just talking about, we're going to host one at the end of this month, and we're going to try facilitating our own. And it's just going to be, okay, this is what we're doing, give us your feedback so we can, make it better. And they said, we should be opening it up to kids. And because they had said, Jesse was there with us, and it kind of grounded us, right? You got to remember why you're doing it. So when kids are in the room, it's helping us become better educators, better learners, better teachers. So that was good. So I think Sonia and Everett are bringing, I always say their tribe, because they've got like 11 kids, maybe 13. Now I heard they were getting a couple more. And so when we did these stories, I think everybody had about, oh, is that me? Okay. We had, I think there was maybe 10 to 11 stories. And I worked on one, and it was called The Grizzly Bear and Coyote. But I wanted to share one story. It was an exercise, the first exercise that we had. And it was how to develop protocols or structured decision making, things like that. And this is the story that we're going to use at this group. It's a child and family workshop. And they want to start understanding how laws in your community or in your family start relating back to becoming a better, healthier, well-rounded parent. Because if we have that, and then especially in a community, then our kids are going to be a lot healthier. So they made up this story, and it was interesting how they did it, because I was talking to a fellow Cookbee about the story that we were going to use, and I was talking about how a nation was going to come in because they got flooded out, and they wanted to practice their own culture and their own language and their teachings. And so we had to decide if we would let them do that. And there was an elderly lady sitting there, and she said, that happened to me when I married into Bonaparte, even though it's a Statliam and Bonaparte is right there. And when she got there, they didn't know how to dry salmon or process it the way I guess she wanted to. So she said, I'm going to teach you. And the elders immediately said, no, you're not teaching the Statliam ways here. And she didn't get to finish the story, so we've invited her back to ask her, can you finish your story? Can you tell us why? Because those would have been teachings that have been passed down from elders to talk about why we can't adopt other cultures and practice them in a nation. Right? So we'll wait and see what the result is of that. And this has happened. A lot of us have flood stories. I think a lot of us have very similar flood stories. The big flood, like right across Canada, right across Turtle Island. Every nation talks about it. The flood story. We all have a creation story. And those can only, like if you go to the Chilcotin, they'll tell you they can't tell your creation story till it's dark. Even when they went into court for the title case. And one of the lawyers asked if they would tell the creation story. And he said, we can only tell it when it's dark. So they had to stop court. And everybody had to go back when it got dark. And then the elder told the creation story of the Chilcotin. Right? So there's protocols that we have to follow to be able to do these. And I think now it's my generation and younger that are starting to learn these. Right? So now we have to be the holders of this information and be able to pass it on. Because if you stop passing on who you are, what you do in your relationship, then that way of life ends. Right? So at least we still have some of that here. And, we have a couple of books, and Grand Chief Saul Terry, he wrote one, and it was the same as yesterday. And he's got a lot of the history written in there. He's probably one of the first cookies that wrote it about our history is written on the land. And it really is. Like you go out there and, at some point it would be great if you go on a field trip. I'd love to go. And then I can show you the history that we have out there. Because it is literally everywhere. Right? And once you know what you're looking for, you'll be able to walk right to it and start understanding what's there, even animals that'll be there, what plants will be there, what they did there, what they were processing there. Anybody have any questions before? I'm just going to read one little story. You good? Okay. Yeah.
Take people to actually explore and to understand on the land?
I would like to take people on our fishing trail, the one that we have, because it's very close to town and it's got everything there.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if there was a language class, because you'd be learning the language as you go up.
Right.
And as you're coming back down. And it's even got, because my community was tool makers, and we made a lot of adzes and bowls out of jade. We made a lot of mortars and pestles and scraping stones. We have the place right along the Fraser where we did that.
Wow. Okay.
And it shows you, how we used the land, literally had to use the land to make all of these.
I think that would be really great. Like I grew up in the States, so I have no Canadian history. So this is where I'm learning my history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. I mean, you can sit above the eagles and above their nest. Like I said, it's beautiful. The gardens that are there can show you where the trees, where they used them as ignition trees. So when they did the burns, there's trees placed on the trail where they would have lit those, and that would have just burnt through the gardens. So then everything was growing back.
Wow.
Yeah, like it's really a special place, and it's not impacted. That's why I think it's a good place to go, because every other place you go to is impacted. Keatley Creek, cows all over the place, right? So they traipsed all over the place. Here we've got, I think the mountain bikes go through, but they're not that bad, right? They call me all the time and, say, can we go through? And it's like, yeah, because they're just, going through. They have their little steps, whatever they build into from, over ditches and things like that. But the history is there, and it's a beautiful history, and you don't really understand it as much till you see it. right? And then it all starts making sense. You know, we didn't just run around in loincloths and hunt and fish. That we, you know, and it's really trying to piece together the society, and especially the economic side of it, because we hosted trade gatherings here, and you did it because it was a show of, I guess, just prominence in the community. And the Statlium were, because of the dried salmon. Like I said, because we could dry salmon, that was a staple for everybody. So they would bring canoes, they would bring furs, they would bring all their basalt cores, obsidian cores. Like there was probably a trade route from the East Coast to here.
Wow.
And it'd be really nice to document that. Like, what did they start from in the East Coast? Where did they stop? What did they trade? Then where did they go from there? Just, you know, like kind of leapfrog their way across. So there's a lot that we can still learn from. Right? You just need to get everybody on the same page to want to do that. But we get bombarded with everything, and then, you know, we have to do 100 things when you can only do 10. Right? So we've got to learn. We actually just need more people working with us, right? So we can piece together all of our history.
Thank you.
So the story that we used, and so it was just an application exercise, and this is the one we're going to use for the workshop. So it says the year is 2075. Sea levels have risen high enough that a neighboring indigenous nation with whom the Statlium have been in close relationship for millennia was forced to flee their home for higher ground. In response to the emergency, many Statlium have opened their homes as they know their neighbors would have responded the same way. This has resulted in a large influx of new people living in Tamiqua Statlium, so the Statlium territory. So Tamiq, that word that means land here. And if you probably go into, I'm going to say maybe another 6 nations, they use the same word. Some of them will say Tamuhi, Tamuqua, and what I found, it was communities that are on our grease trail, so our trading route. So it was a language that was common that we shared, so we used that. So when we went into a village, we had common words that we would share with each other. So 2 years have passed since the migration. Children are being born, families are settling, and neighbors are wanting to practice their own traditions respectfully, knowing they are guests on this territory. While there has been conflict, there has also been reciprocity. Both peoples have shared knowledge and helped each other in the face of great change. It has recently become clear that the neighboring nation will not be able to return to their homelands for some time, if ever. Knowing this, the neighboring nation approaches the Statlium Chiefs Council to ask, is there a way for us to maintain who we are in Statlium territory, while also respecting your laws? A community meeting open only to Statlium was held to address this question. Statlium recognized the reality that their neighbors have nowhere else to go, but at the meeting, participants also voiced concerns for the land, their relatives, and the Statlium way of life. The Council takes seriously the challenge of maintaining Statlium distinct language, culture, and traditions while balancing the responsibilities they may have to their neighbors. Furthermore, everyone anticipates that long-term coexistence will bring challenges, and concerns have been shared that without a dispute resolution process, serious conflict may arise. So what now? So the Statlium Chiefs Council has identified 2 groups of experts of Statlium law. First, those who will articulate the principles and responses to balance the needs of Statlium and the neighboring nation. And second, those who will develop a dispute resolution process. You are members of these expert groups. And so we're going to do this exercise. This will be the one that we're all going to do. And we used this one because we had to start looking at what our laws and our protocols were. And again, we all don't know what they are. Right? As Statlium, there was a lot of our history that wasn't taught to us. And a lot of it was taken or erased even, and a big part of it was residential schools. Right? So, you know, when you take the kids out of the circle, a lot of those teachings stop. right? So when that happened, they started learning more colonial ways, and then the culture got taken from them. Summertime was really the only time they could come home and maybe go fishing, go to the garden, and still be able to practice and have some of that way of life and still have some of that language is still part of their knowledge. But then when school started again, they went back to residential school, right? So they didn't get to eat everything that they processed, right? So there was just a lot that was wrong with that. But for us, it took a lot of our way of life and the teachings away. And so now we're doing what we can to make sure that we can have that back. And it is going to take a long time because you've got to look at 600 communities just in Canada, right across Canada, that were impacted. Right? So all of these kids, when, like I said, when you take them out of the circle, then the teachings stop. And, in Shekelwash, somebody had played a song. We did a ceremony for, bringing spirits home. And they wrote a song and they said it was about the silence in a community, once all the kids had gone back to school. And, so that was a big part of losing a lot of our history. And when we talk about the stories that are still there, and thankfully they're still there, we had linguists. I think that's what they're called, linguists. No, there's another name for them, but they came through the Statlium probably in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And they spent a lot of time with our elders who were speaking the language fluently, and they documented a lot of the stories, recorded them, and published the stories in the language. So at least we still have that with us. And I think I brought a couple of books just to show you. Sam Mitchell, yeah, I did bring it. So Sam Mitchell, and so it was, I can't remember the guy's name that came through, but he's got a lot of the stories, him and Charlie Mack, and I think there's another elder. So this guy was really lucky just to sit with them and listen to them talk. And Charlie Mack's, he spoke only in his language, and then Sam did a lot of the interpretation and translated for the linguist, and then he put it in a book. And this book only came out a little while ago, and it was funny because somebody came and tried to sell it to us for $650. Right? But and when you think about it, it's because they know we want it that bad that we would pay that price, that it means so much, but we already had a copy. And we had to tell this guy, don't be doing that. Like, don't be trying to make that much money off our own people. This is our history, our language that we lost, and now he's trying to make us pay for it. So it's just lessons learned. But that's his book. And then Grand Chief Salteri, he wrote one the same as yesterday. And so this is my chief, Jean Baptiste, and he signed a declaration that they signed, that we always refer to when we talk about title and rights. We always refer to our declaration that was signed in 1910 or 1911. And there was quite a few. James Tate was actually the translator, went around, wrote all of these declarations for most of the chiefs in BC. I think he went over into, I want to say London, but I don't think it's London, but they made a trek over there in 1906, and they went and seen the king. And they wanted to talk about that they never, ceded their land. And when they came back, they told everybody about their discussion. They went across Canada and they met with the Prime Minister. And they were talking about their meeting with the king and what the king had told them, that needed to be done. And the Prime Minister responded, well, I haven't got that message from the king yet. Right? So there was quite a few chiefs who made that trip over there. So it was a disappointment when they had to leave, knowing that, the king, hadn't got back to the Prime Minister yet. And so all of these things started happening in the early 1900s. Resource extraction really destroyed the environment, right? And a lot of it was industry, was, trying to make economics work, not realizing how the land needed to be managed, that we had managed it for about 10,000 years. And we managed it really well, right? Because we survived all those years. We survived to get enough food into our villages. We survived to get food out into other people. And when you look at the village sites, the population we probably had in the Statlium, I'm going to say maybe in the northern Statlium was probably about 50,000, if not more of us. So if you go to one of our villages, or all of them, every community has a village site, and you have to look at, well, how many fish did it take to feed everybody? And then how many deer did it take, to even clothe everybody, and all of the tools, all of the firewood, all of the wood it taken to actually build our house pits, right? Who even designed and built these houses. So we had carpenters, we had engineers, we had doctors, we had tailors, we had all of that. Right, we had to do that in order to survive. And so when you sit and look at the villages, you got to look at, well, how did they plan it? How did they provide for everybody there? Right? There's elders out there who tell about great stories of hunting. And you had to send out a big hunting party. And, you just sent the hunters out. And then when they got enough, they actually set little fires. And if they put, four little spot fires over here, and then over here they might have 3, and then over here they might have 2. Well, it was telling the village, okay, you need to send us, 10 people. You need to send us 6 people. You need to send us 10 people, so that they could pack all the food back. Right? So it's all this knowledge that is out there that needs to be taught to not only myself, but to me, everyone. But especially the Statlium. This is our history. And we need to understand that, because once we quit telling these stories, they get lost. Right? Like if we don't remember them anymore, then those memories just stop. But how do you get all the storytellers in one room to be able to do this and just have our own storytelling? Right? Because I think they're fascinating. Right? And there's so much to learn. Yes.
Oh, thank you. But I would imagine in your communities you have an idea of who you'd like to see carry the stories forward. So you make sure they're in the rooms as the storytellers come to me, or what's that look like for you guys?
Well, right now it's the old people, and then you've got people like me coming in and being able to sit with them as a knowledge keeper. But when we were at the workshop in Whistler, we had one young man, Delaney, Adolf, and he really picked up on the stories. And so now he gets up and he tells the stories. And he'll do it at the youth gathering. I don't know if you're all going. There's a youth forum next week, and it's from grade 7 to 12, I believe. They should open it up, because there's a lot of fun things and stories going on there. You could just say I'm short. Yes. Oh, the speaker. Yeah. It would get loud, and I know, because I'm loud in the first place. Then I get these, and I get even louder. Yeah, but I think Chief Darrell, he has Sundance ceremonies up at his place. He hosts Sundance ceremonies. And there's a Sundancer that goes to his place. And he's one of the guys that tells the week-long story. So I asked Chief Darrell, let me know when he's there. I don't know that I would spend the week up there, but even to know, how does a story last that long? Like, what do you talk about? Like, why is it a week long? Because you'll hear it a lot from people going, well, normally this story's going to take a week, but I'm going to give you the 15-minute version. I was like, well, I want to hear the week-long version. And, you know, what is it about? And so the East Coast, they've, because of, you know, I guess settlers, you know, getting over there a lot quicker, like, you know, in the 1400s, they've got more documented because of the treaty agreements, you know, that they signed together. So when you go over there, they've got more here, you know, trying to get over into BC, where we've got maybe 2 real treaties. Others are just kind of, you know, treaties, but they don't work. They're meaningless. Right? So it's very different when you're not a treaty nation compared to treaty nations. There seems to be more history because they were willing to sign it, didn't get anything, got ripped off, but they got, I guess they won't say they didn't get anything. The most valuable thing is they got to document their history and who they were. Where here, I don't know, because we said no, the treatment was a bit different, really unfair, and we didn't get to document that history. Yeah. Yeah, so there's I think there's like, I don't know if it's the Blueberry, if they've got a treaty up north on the coast, like Duncan area, they've got the Douglas Treaty, which was, I think, probably first contact, and so they're always fighting about that treaty. They've got the Nisga'a Treaty, which was the government, and they're trying to form a government, but that's really hard because you got to try to form a non-Indigenous government and, you know, try to tax your people. And even just that, they need to understand that we did tax people. You had to pay your way in the community. But you have to have that conversation. How did we do that? What was our contribution? Everybody had a role and a responsibility in the community, and that's what we need to get back to. We need to identify those roles, like we might identify Delaney is the storyteller. It might be his job now that he always has to pass on these stories because they're really hard. Like I'll read one to you and you'll and I'll explain. I've got to find it though, but I don't know which one, Vanessa, which one did you work on? Yeah. Yeah.
Was the grandmother and being late with her grandson.
Oh, Copper and the boy? Okay.
That was one of them, and then the other one was the boy who he was always taking and never giving, and they all left him alone, and he found his grandma under the basket. That was
Okay.
the other one,
Yeah.
and they left him alone for a while, and then he realized that he didn't act right, and so he became abusive, and people had to lose the weight and had come back to someone came back. Raven, was it Raven that came back, or?
I think so.
I think it was
Yeah,
Raven
but
that came back. Yeah, so those were the two. That was the first one I did, and then the second one was the dream of grandmother. There was a lot about grandmothers and grandsons.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the stories that we had there, so we had Mink and the Jawbones, we had Coyote and Grizzly, the Whale and Anderson Lake, the Flood and the Distribution of People, Maggot Gets Fire, the Boy in the Sun, the Man Who Lived with the Bear, Chimkin, the Poor Man or the Origin of Copper, Mosquito and Thunder, the Salmon Men or the Origin of Salmon, Story of the Transformers, and Helping One Another. And so I wish I had the story of why Rabbit is the big chief. I'd like to bring that one because you never know Rabbit is the big chief. You'd think like Grizzly Bear is the big chief, but it's just because Rabbit provides for the people. So he's considered the big chief, so he was looked after quite well. I had a lot to say in the, I guess in the forest community. grizzly? Yeah. Mink and jawbone.
Yeah, they're all good. I enjoy all those stories that we get. Oh, how many times has that happen?
So I'll share one story with you and then just some of the meanings behind it. So this one is called Coyote and Grizzly. And it's Charlie Mack told the story, and it's in a book that was published about him in 1971. So back then in 1971, like I said, the linguists were coming through, and they were documenting the language and the stories. So Charlie Mack, he's like, I'm telling a legend about Seton Lake. There were some people settled at the head of the lake, grizzly bear and coyote. They were hungry, but the only person with food was the stingy grizzly bear, who wouldn't give anything away. The hungry coyote decided to try to get some salmon. He went down to the beach where he came across a fish bone, but it had nothing on it. He carried on till he came across another fish bone. He jumped over it a few times till it became fresh fish. He got 4 salmon and decided that was enough, as that was all he could pack. On his way back, he came across a rose bush with dried berries on it. He jumped over them a few times and they became fresh Saskatoon berries. He put the Saskatoon branches on his pack with the salmon. He got back to the camp and showed the people his salmon and berries. Coyote said, there are all kinds of salmon coming up the river and all kinds of Saskatoon berries. We don't need anything around here. Let's go upriver and get something to eat. They went up the river to a place called Theut, where the bridge over the Fraser is today. He hollered at the people that he was going up the river. It was late in the year and the snow was beginning to fall. He was on the north side of the river and the people were on the other side. He traveled at night. Grizzly Bear awoke at Seton Lake and found all the salmon gone. All that was left was rose bushes and fish bones, for they had changed again. Must have been Coyote, he said. No one else would do these tricks. Coyote kept going up to where Bridge River meets the Fraser River. He could tell by the way he was hollering that it was Coyote. Grizzly was starting to follow him while he could still see the tracks in the snow. It was snowing heavily, but Grizzly Bear got up to the Fraser Falls above Lillooet. Coyote was still hollering on his way while the snow was falling. Up past the falls, Coyote was telling the people he was going up the river. The snow was falling heavily and he could hardly see the tracks. Coyote was still hollering on his way while the snow was falling up past the falls. Coyote was telling the people he was going up the river. The snow was falling heavily and you could hardly see the tracks. Coyote was walking on through snow and Grizzly Bear was following, but he could hardly see the tracks. The place was called Blue Rock, near Moran, north of Pavilion. Was so far as Coyote had traveled. Grizzly Bear turned back to Seton Lake. And so when we read that, and they asked us to talk about, well, what were the teachings that came from that? And we all talked about Coyote, because he's the trickster. He can do all these things, he can transform. But Grizzly Bear, which I'm more of an expert on, I've been helping study and do research on grizzly bears for, I don't know, like maybe 25 years. We've been trying to do grizzly bear recovery in this area. And we all talked, well, why was he stingy? And so the teaching that came from the story on why Grizzly Bear was stingy with his food is because he would be alone. Grizzly Bear wouldn't have a whole family with him. He doesn't even stop to, he doesn't raise his family. He's all by himself. He's out there traipsing all over the territory and he's actually managing it for the rest of the wildlife, right? He's making trails for them. He's showing people where they need to go. So when they say he was stingy, he needed to be, because he didn't need anybody following him. If he had anybody following him, it changed the way of life, of who would be going, where he could go. The smells would all be different. They would be overeating everything. And so when you look at Coyote, and he was just showing them, okay, well, I know there's salmon this way. We need to go this way. I need to show you. I need you to get away from Grizzly Bear. I'm going to show you there's another place for us to fish. So he took them from Seton over to the Fraser, and then they went up the Fraser to Bridge River and Fountain where they fish. And Moran Falls is actually just right above there. Probably, I don't know, like maybe another 15 miles up the river is called Moran. It's on the West Pavilion Road. But those are the teachings that come from very short stories, where this one, again, is one of those, it could take a day or two to read these stories. But all of our stories have teachings, and what we're trying to do, what we're trying to do now is take the teachings from them, because they were told to us for a reason. When our grandparents sat us down to tell these stories, there was teachings that came from them. And so we have quite a few that are published. Most of our stories are published. Now, there's probably not too many that aren't published. So they would be easy to find. I think there's books out there that you can get them, can go to. Probably the Tribal Council has a library, the Cultural Center, or not the Cultural Center, but USSLS we call it, the Upper Statliam Language Education Society. They have books, they have DVDs and coloring books. They have all of the stories there. And I think there was a decision made years ago by the elders to say to share it. And they do have something that says the only way that we can protect our way of life is to pass it on to the next generation. Right? So that's them saying, you can't hold it. It's not yours to actually, just keep inside of you. And I think that would go for every culture. You never want it to stop, right? You want to keep those stories going, and you have to know that they're there, right? And sometimes it takes a while to look at it and go, well, what is the teaching from this? Why are they telling me this story? Right? Because these come from something that has been passed on from generation to generation. And they're interesting when you look at them in a different way. Right? So I'm hoping that the more we develop the way that we're going to facilitate workshops on storytelling, that, we even come back and we take some of these stories and see what, a young group as yourself, what you take from the stories. Right, because we purposely, at the workshop when we had it, I'd asked that there be a younger group sit together. I just wanted to hear what they would come up with from these stories. And, one thing they said, if you want us to know this stuff, you have to teach us. And that's a very clear message. Not, as even leadership, we're all sitting around saying we're doing this for the next generation. Well, if they don't know what it is you want, then the probability of upholding the title and rights in our declaration is going to stop at some point. Right? So there is a lot that, just in the Statliam history and culture, that has to be passed on. Then you look at all of Canada, and you have 600 bands, our First Nations communities. In BC, we have 200 of them, over 200 communities in BC, and 36 languages spoken. I don't know if the Cree speak different languages. I don't go outside of my territory, but I should ask that. Is Cree only one language? I don't know. I don't know why we have so many here. When you look at our land and how it changes, it seems like that's how our language changes with the land. And then in shared areas, we have some common terms, right, where we actually would have, had to go into areas, and if deer were passing through their migration routes, that was what we called shared areas of responsibility, and we had to look after them together. And we did that with the Chilcotin, but we fought with them quite often. They actually took over the territory at one time. They said for about 20 years the Chilcotin were here. And I thought, 20 years, it would have been enough time to go back and kind of build up your warrior population again, and then come back and take your territory back. Right? But that's just some of our history, and I love talking about it. Yeah, so, but I think I'm going to stop there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, so did I. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the stories were amazing within the workshop that we did. Sorry, okay, the baby is just waking up. And hearing from each of your perspectives, kids,
Mhm.
because your perspective is going to be different from us adults.
Yeah.
So as you go home and you talk to your family, find someone you can tell the story to, the grizzly and the
Coyote.
and yeah, yeah, we're very honored that you were able to come be with us today, and hopefully we can plan in the future. Maybe we can have a walkthrough with you,
Yeah, no, that would be great.
maybe to the fishing
Yeah, no, it would be go to their fishing trail.
trail.
This
Yeah.
is beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. You know, because even like all of our baskets are starting to come back. I seen somebody was selling a bunch of baskets on Facebook today, but I'm hoping he knows where they came from. Because even the designs mean something on there. It tells you what family they belong to.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
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 There's
Yeah.
the
I wonder if that's my uncle.
Oh. I love the arts, like the indigenous artwork around here. I did some pottery with Patrick.
Oh, yeah.
Beach,
Yeah.
and the carving of all the symbols and
Mhm.
he is so good at it. I tried it and I was not good at it at all. So it takes skill. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Six Nations, that's over where his brother George's wife comes from.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Because of
Samaya, I think, is yeah.
Cinti,
Scent, yeah.
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 Passed it on to George. So it's very cool. Like you were saying, how they come into as we grow and move around, how these different cultures are transferred into others.
Yeah.
So when you, sorry, Vanessa.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I had a question. 'Cause
Mm-hmm.
you had mentioned you're still learning about this too, because you're hoping the storyteller will come back and finish her story around why, when she was at Bonaparte, why they said no, we don't want those teachings in our community. I'm fascinated to find out why. Like, what was it about that? Is it because there might be, when we talk about, when I hear about you speaking about stories and how it's important to carry the information forward, is it because there might be a melding of the two, and then the story or where it comes from or the significance or the history behind it gets, not watered down, but almost like it becomes more of an abstract as opposed to a truth.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, that's why I asked her to come back. It's like, I need you to finish the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
On
definitely.
why did they say no?
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't.
Yeah, I want to know too.
Yeah, because she had thought that they just didn't have anybody there that knew. So she's like, well, I'm going to teach you our way, and then it was an immediate no.
Okay.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it is interesting.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder too, just off the top of my head, I mean, the climate is similar, but maybe not the same. So maybe some stories and lessons applied don't translate over based on the environment. So
Well, even like if you go to the Thompson, they don't have dry racks.
they don't.
Don't like they're just not there. So I don't know what they have, how they processed. I don't know if they just smoked or if it was all fresh or yeah, but they don't have dry racks
Yeah,
there, which they should because it's very hot.
that's
But
true.
I don't know if they just don't have the wind like here. You know, you could dry a salmon 2-3 days if the wind's blowing and the temperature is right.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And even down in Lytton, and they build all of their racks at home. And I always asked, well, why? And they said, well, people stealing for one, but just a lot of the guts and stuff. And it's like, well, That's where you would put in for making oil or even feeding bears and wildlife. You would just go put it aside. A lot of it you wouldn't throw in because it does muck up the system, right? It's just the smells and stuff. So there's all these teachings of how we needed to be responsible at the river. Yeah. 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 We were down in Nequatqua on Anderson Lake, and they've got pictographs all along the lake. And they had these pictographs, and they had this one, and everybody's always like, oh, that's the sun. It's like nobody back then would have, drew the sun with all the lines on it. We do that today, right? But back then, that wouldn't have been the sun. It's actually, that's a house pet, and there's this many families. That's what the ticks are. But they had this one, and they said, yeah, it's like a mom holding the child's hand. And that's what it kind of looks like, a couple people walking. And I thought, I think to me, I thought it was a route or a trail, or it was mountaintops. And so I took a picture of it, and then I went on Google Earth. And then I went up into, because there's Melvin Creek, and then you go over, and there's Boulder Pass, and then you get over, and there's Nahatlatch. It's kind of like a line of sight from there. And you look at the tops of the mountains, just how you would look on Google Earth. And that's what it looked like. It looked like there was this person holding the hand. That was just from, when you look down and you look at the watersheds. And I thought, I wonder if they would be at the top of the mountains, because you can see those types of things, or that's how they map them, right? They're just looking, it's like, okay, when we go over here, for you to get to us, you need to go through watersheds that are shaped like this. Like you're going to see it, and then it's going to get you over into probably the Fraser, right? So I started looking at them that way when there was like odd drawings, just to see if it was more watershed based, if they would have written them that way. Because I was like, no, but it just made no sense. Like, especially the sun. I always told people, it's like, yeah, that's not the sun.
I would assume that it would be communicating something important.
Yeah.
Greatly see the sun that way, but when you get back into the mind of the ancient times, it's probably different than the way we think.
Well, even the ones at the Stein, because it seemed like they were done, like you'd never find them all like that in one place. It's like they needed to preserve them, protect them. Something was happening.
Right.
So somebody went and drew them all and put them in one spot so that they were saved and protected. So it was either, there was going to be a big war going on, so they knew there was a tribe coming in, there was going to be a big fight. They couldn't, probably knew they were going to lose, or something would have been going on, because it's like they just put them all in one area to make sure that they were documented, because you would never have them all in one spot. That's just when you see how many pictograph sites we have, they're not like that. Yeah, you just kind of have what's in this watershed. You don't have everything that's not in that watershed. It's really, that's what it's telling you. This is what you're going to find. This is who's been there. That's normally what pictographs are telling you. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. But thank you for listening. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for sharing
Yeah.
with us, and we look
Mhm.
forward to hopefully having
You're
you
welcome.
share with us again.
Mm-hmm.
We can make it we'll talk about it later.
Yeah, we can get outside and sit outside and just tell the stories there. Yeah.
And I know, I was telling Jeanette, I said, because you were reading stories and stuff, because as a friendship center, once when we were cooking, we started working on that big building. We get all these little, forest teachers that want to just drum and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that'd be so cool to be able to do that, because Chris loved it.
Mhm.
Quite a few kids there that day, so it was really neat.
Yeah.
And we'll give you a note.
Mm-hmm. Okay. you. Coach them. Coach them. That's another, like the Inlakakmuk and Shwetmuk, they use the same. They say coach them. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
After I spent a lot of time teaching you that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. I don't know where the off button is. No, I don't want to wreck that.
Actually, I couldn't record it, but for personal, it's me like this. If you want to see it, I'll give you your Facebook thing and you can see it yourself. But only me can see now.
Yeah, okay. No,
But anyone who asks to see it, then I can just put it in my
Yeah, yeah.
account or something. Or link.
Okay, everyone come gather over here to the front. Front. Keep going. I knew you were over that. Still a little dead. You're still a kid. Okay, let me see here. I know. Or Dad, do you mind taking a picture?
Yeah, okay.
And we get Mom's, let's get in the picture too. Mom's too? Yeah, my dad. Here we go. Here, stand right there. That's okay. Here, I'll stay on you until he comes. Oh, okay. Okay, look over here, guys.
Okay. I can walk.
Maybe I will grab baby. Come here, baby. Okay, there we go.
1, 2, ready, sing. Okay.
Okay.
Got thousands of them.
Okay. You can share with us. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's kind of what I felt. The author has changed the language. Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. I've been training like back in the day. You're all trainers, right? Thank you for asking me. I really appreciate it.
I feel like even in my time, we didn't understand and it was the history of the land.
Yeah.
Like, for like thousands of years.
Yeah.
We just wouldn't